Hello there, and welcome to another edition of Rocket's Rambler Garage. It's been kind of a breakneck pace around here, cleaning parts, and unfortunately, it kind of looks like nothing's gotten accomplished because all you got is the car still tore apart. So it's kind of one of those tough periods when you're working, and it doesn't look like anything gets done and nothing's getting crossed off on the whiteboard as getting accomplished. But we've got a table like this set up remotely that's just packed with cleaned up and refurbished and painted up parts. So much so I put some carpet down on the floor underneath it and pretty much have the carpet underneath it covered with parts and stuff too. And of course there's a table sitting next to this one that's at least in part covered in parts as well. So in spite of the way things look, we are actually making progress, which is good. But we've got one thing we want to do. We're not going to do anything actually to the transmission other than put a seal in the back end here. Now I'm going to grab here in a second the container that's been sitting on the floor soaking and catching the oil that's been dripping out of the torque tube, and I'll spin it here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Yeah. So for those that don't know, a lot of older cars ran a drive shaft inside a pipe like this, or what they call a torque tube. Part of the idea behind it was back from the early days of the automobile, when many of the roads were simply dirt, or in some cases, if they were really lavish, they were gravel. And of course, in the wintertime, they were pretty muddy and pretty rutted, and it wasn't uncommon to be buried up to your axles in dirt and muck and mud. So this actually provided some protection to the drive shaft and kept it out of the elements. The front universal joint is inside the back of the transmission slash very front of the torque tube. There's just a slip coupling in the very back to connect it to the pinion, and of course everything is completely sealed across here. There's kind of a rubber seal here of sorts, they call it trunnion, and just a bolt flange to hold it all together. Pretty effective at keeping the dirt out. I can't say with the advent of better sealing devices on the U-joints that it does a whole lot to improve the life of the universal joint, but it is kind of what it is. Part of the reason they call it a torque tube is as the rear wheels turn, the axle is pushed forward, and with coil springs you either need some control arms, as in like a 3 or 4 link suspension like Ford or GM used, or leaf springs, which then means the forward thrust of the axle is pushing on the front half of the leaf spring, which is then attached to the body of the car, so the car's pushed forward by the leaf spring. In this case, the axle assembly pushes against this tube and actually pushes on the back of the transmission, and the load in this case is actually carried up to the bell housing here on the transmission, and there's rubber mounts here that transmit the load into the transmission crossmember, and thus pushes the car forward at the transmission mount rather than someplace in the very back. I wouldn't say one necessarily works better than the other. They all work. It's just slightly different in how they did it. A lot of people hate these just because if you have to change U-joints, you have to actually take the rear diff torque tube assembly out like you see it here, and then you can put a couple of pry bars and pull the axle or the drive shaft out of the tube. There is a midship support bearing in the middle to take the whip out that's rubber mounted, and that has to be slid out. Now in this particular case, we took this one and separated it from the transmission and had it sitting on a block like it is now, which is slightly putting an angle downhill on that tube, and we have gotten a container down here that I finally put underneath this to catch the oil. And that's after it probably dripped this much on the floor. There's a good cup of oil in here right now. And that's just what was in that tube, which means one of two things. Either the transmission tail seal is leaking and letting oil pass, or the pinion seal is, and it's letting gear oil from the differential run forward. Don't know which one this one is that's giving us the troubles, so I went ahead and ordered both seals. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to drop the very last section of this transmission off and replace that seal, assuming the one I got is the right outer diameter. I did check it and it does fit the front. And then we're going to have to unbolt this tube and remove it. I don't know if I'm going to pull the drive shaft out. I don't have to, but I might. And then there's a domed cone inside the rear of that tube that you guys might not be able to see where I have the camera sitting. Yeah, you really can't quite see it, so I'll move you over a little bit so you can see it. Right here at the bolt flange is it's about, I don't know, 1 3/4, 2 inches tall sheet metal pressing. It's sandwiched between the differential housing and the torque tube flange and has a seal in it, and the outer diameter of the slip coupling that ties the drive shaft to the pinion shaft has that where it seals against it, and there's a little seal that's probably not the issue at all because it almost never is. There's an oil seal on the inside that's not much more than some goop that keeps it from running around the splines itself. So because it's leaked so much oil, we've got to go in and do those seals just to ensure that we don't fill this tube up. Unfortunately, the oil gets really tough on the rubber that they put around the outside of that carrier bearing in the middle and tends to turn it to mush, and then your drive line whips in the middle. The drive line is actually 2-piece. It's solid in the back half, and it's a 2-inch diameter tube on the front, and it's got a spline coupling in the middle where it joins the two halves together. And so if that bearing gets weak, that drive shaft whips significantly. So I'll actually probably pull it out and just make sure it hasn't turned to mush and clean a lot of the oil and grease off the outside so it does not turn to mush, because unfortunately a lot of the rubbers soften pretty bad with long-term submersion in gear oils and engine oils and things. So it's not uncommon to see rubbers degrade like that. They weren't made for submersion like that, and so they just soften. So anyway, the next thing I'm going to do, I am going to grab a wrench or two and a pan of some sort to put underneath that tail shaft on the transmission here and get that tail shaft extension off the back of the transmission. We're going to have to clean it, and then we'll go ahead and knock the seal out and press a new one in.
I just wanted to make something.
Make something?
Yeah.
Actually, the thing that you're probably going to have to make for me.
Hold on.
Ooh, there's probably a old aluminum pan in the back. I'm going to grab a mallet so I don't beat my palm. I expect there'll be oil in here, so I'm not going to make a mess if I can help it. One thing you learn with time, these hammers work a whole lot better than your palms do it. Doing what I did the first time, which is beat on the wrench with my palm and make your hand hurt. That's how you tell mechanics that have been at it a while. New mechanics have their hands all beat up and they're all cut and scarred up, and the old timers find ways of doing it without slipping and taking their knuckles off. give me a 5/8 ratcheting box wrench.
Ratcheting.
Yeah.
That's cheating.
Cheating? No. Actually,
Flexi or non-flexi?
actually, the tough one with this. Never mind. They've got a clip here for the wire for the speed sensor, and I got to bend it out of the way, or I won't even get on the thing. Give me my big pry bar, please. I don't know if the factory bent it that way or not. They probably did, but once they bolted it together, they didn't care. Now that I got to take it apart, I got to bend that out of the way. There we go. We just might go straighten that bracket out when we get done here. Can't tell if that turned. It did turn. I didn't get any oil out of this end at all yet. There's a bearing or something there. Yep, there's a big, huge single row ball bearing right there to support that. And actually it's mostly pressed into the back end of the housing, or in the main case. You gotta love it. Whoever put it together, I can see it right there. Part of the reason it leaks, there's a dent in it from whoever had to put it together, banged the slip yoke on that, putting it together. CR seal number off this bearing down to my local Napa, and they're like, what? Okay, so you know what the term there is? Crispy.
Degrease.
Degrease, please. No, take it to the good, good one.
Take the bad one first.
It ain't that gooey.
Yeah, but I'd like to keep the good stuff good.
All right, fair enough. You go wash that, and I will go wash this bracket, take it and give it a straightening. I'm surprised, not a bit of oil back there.
That is a Fafnir.
Fafnir bearing?
Yeah.
Huh. That's an old name in bearings. They've been around a long time.
207 R or K?
Now somebody will probably say, why are you bothering to clean the splines?
You aim it over here.
So they could see you.
Oh.
And you're...
Well, remember how wide that angle is. You could see me when it was facing this way.
Maybe so. These splines were pretty grungy, so wouldn't normally do much with them, but I wanted to get the worst of the worst off of it. We'll lube this up before we put it all back together with the slip yoke on it. For anybody that might be wondering what that rag is for, that is the speedometer hole. So the drive cable for the speedometer goes in there and is held in by a clip. Okay, that takes care of that. We're ready to go back together. So I'm going to take this over and run it through our cleaner solvent and finish cleaning it up, and then work on getting the seal out of this thing. You guys will never be able to see it, so I'm not going to try. Down inside there is an old felt seal. Yeah, not rubber. They actually have a felt facing on it. It's also not going to come out worth a darn. It's going to get beat to death taking it out of there, which is too bad. I gave the stock number off of it to my local Napa, and they looked at me like I was crazy. Alright, so I am. That's alright.
Very.
They looked it up by application, so hopefully we got the right seal. There's a bit of an oil slinger or something here. The slip yoke must go into that too. We'll have to make sure we lube everything up good. So when it goes back together, it's not running dry. Now somebody will probably ask. So I'll tell you what happens, or what's provisioned here. To keep the tube from filling up with oil like it did, there's actually a little slot cast into the bottom of the transmission torque tube flange. And what's supposed to happen is when the torque tube is downhill, the oil will run here and drip out this. For some reason, for the most part, that did not happen, which is why we have the mess we have now. So, not sure. We'll have to look and see if something was blocking that, or somebody got enterprising and decided to silicone the flange or something and plug that up. This is a brake spoon, but it might help get it out a little bit better. Alright, I'll be back after I set this on something a little more solid. Alright, so what was sitting in there is a ring of felt. That was the seal. And it's actually a gigantic one-piece seal. I thought there was two pieces to this and it would separate. But it's actually like a, somewhat of a rubberized slinger to go with the felt. So with that, we got everything apart. So I gotta wipe it down. Go make sure I don't have too much damage in the bore down here from tapping that out. I have a little bit of damage, so I'm gonna have to do a little bit of cleanup from where my screwdriver left some marks. So let me get a little round tail file and clean that up. Try not to damage bores like this, but occasionally you do. So you got to take and clean any ridges off of them. Usually they don't cause too much other trauma. Probably pretty close to good enough. I'll get a little piece of emery cloth I can sand that with. We'll call it good. That's right, I damaged the spot back here. I gotta fix too. That one will cause me great grief. That was a spot where the screwdriver hit. If I don't fix that, it'll push down that bearing and cause it to probably be too tight. Press in. We'll goop that up with some sealant and we'll go over to the press. and push that in. And if you've heard me before, you know I hate when we beat them in with a hammer and a drift punch. And I'll show you why. If you bend this support lip where the lip is here that does the sealing, if you bend any of this metal right here, the first thing you'll do is cause that seal to leak. They can't bend them. So it's a whole lot safer to put something flat on this and press it in nice and even. And even though this is a different thickness, that seal is parallel with this back face here. We should be able to press that in very nicely, and that'll keep it from getting damaged. This also provides a certain level of slip and slide to make the seal press in a little easier. Flat plate on that. Now I gotta stack up my Legos and pray, and we'll have to watch that to make sure it goes in straight. It is gonna be nip and tuck. I didn't chamfer the leading edge of that board very much, so we'll check it. She's something, as they say. It may not be right, but it is different. Beautifully straight and square. No damage whatsoever. A little bit of ooze out of Permatex 2 most of the way around. So we are good. And we never hit that seal lip with a hammer. Backside looks really good. Okay. I don't know if you guys can see in there. It's kind of dark probably. Ain't got the best backlighting right here. But she's in. She looks really good. Oh, I think all I'm going to do with this is, first of all, dry it off, and then I think I'm going to take the metal clip over and just stick it in the vise and flatten it out. Always pre-lube your seals. Running a dry seal will ruin your brand new seal. We'll lube the slip yoke up on the outside before we assemble it too, but you want to make sure your seal has lube. Okay. And Benjamin has rediscovered the miracle of anti-seize. It's the product that the minute you so much as look at the container, you'll have it everywhere. Because it's just one of those things that's what happens. It winds up everywhere. Another trick for those that aren't aware, put all your bolts in before you tighten the first one up, because sometimes you need to be able to rotate to get one of them to line up, and if you tighten it, you'll be loosening it back up again. That should do. Alright, with that, the transmission is done. Alright, with the transmission done, tucked away, we put a few things away like the table, so on and so forth. Next thing I'm going to dive into is this seal, and I don't know if it'll show up or not, probably not, but I moved the tub that I had underneath it catching drips, and there's already a puddle, probably 2 inches across, sitting on the floor. So there's a good chance the rear end seal is what's leaking, because it looks like it's a little bit downhill, but it's been sitting that way for a week, which means there's a little bit of lube dripping out and running down the tube constantly, which is feeding that. Really wouldn't be too much of a problem, except out on the road it runs forward and then immediately gets splashed all the way back. And a hotel parking lot you go into, you wind up gooping it all up on them too. So we'll attend to that next. So if I do this right, keep this uphill, the oil will stay in the diff, and I won't open that up and have a disaster on my hands.
We still will, just because it'll have run all the way down through the torque tube.
I know, it's leaking.
Okay. Mushy.
Well, they're never that hard to begin with. Well, as Mayhem pointed out, oh, I destroyed that glove already. Oh well. That rubber is a little mushy, but it is still intact and it's still serviceable. But it's important to keep the oil leaks under control, or you do really make a mess of these. What I'm trying to do here is pry up on this and get the tube, or get the drive shaft out of the torque tube itself. There it goes. So I lied to you guys earlier. That's a solid shaft all the way down. The thing we're going to do when we put this back together, besides clean it up a bit, is grease it. Huh. It's a weird U-joint. It's got a grease fitting in the bearing cap. It's got a grease fitting in the dead center behind the yoke where you can't get to it. Good design there. That one gets tight periodically. All we're doing is we're slipping the bearing up the shaft, or up the tube itself. Boy. Okay. I'm gonna have to regroup a little bit here. I'm gonna turn this some more. Readjust my chalk blocks. Man. Mayhem?
Yeah.
Come here for a second. Or actually a little more than a second. Grab a hold of this shaft, just like I am, in your hand here, and pull. Oh, easy does it. Right.
There's your equivalent of a carrier bearing.
Yep. And we need to get a rag quick and wipe that up before it pukes oil everywhere on the floor. Torque spec on these bolts is like 150 foot-pounds, so I wasn't too surprised this didn't come apart with the electric. Am I on 4? I'm on 4.
Are you going the right direction?
Yeah, there's some rust on the bolt head because it sits in that pocket. So he has some ear marks that somebody's broke the weld nut off the inside. There's a nut I gotta hold on to. Yep. Okay. There's normally a weld nut in here instead of a nut, so I gotta figure out what to reach in here with and get a hold of it. It feels too small. maybe. It feels like it's spun in a circle. Spicy. Well, that was fun. It's gonna be fun to get it out of there too. Yeah. Okay. Just split that apart like a turkey you're getting ready to stuff. Something like that. Yeah, what a fine mess. We just might stand this up and flush some solvent through it and try to get rid of some of this muck and de-oil this. Unfortunately, they put a U-joint in with a grease fitting sticking out of it that's run around here like a lawnmower blade and cut a groove in everything. Ugh. About time to change gloves again. Oh, yeah. Take that and kind of stand it up in the solvent tank. We got to pop that drive shaft apart. You know why?
There's no seal in there?
No, the brass washer that goes between the two halves of the drive shaft is laying in the bottom end of the tube down here. Somebody had it apart and had that brass washer. So what they have is a two-piece drive shaft with a coupling, and to keep the two ends from touching each other and going click, which they do on a shift, you'll hear this little pop when on a shift, and it's the two ends of the drive shaft touching each other. So they put a thin brass flat disc in there to keep that from happening, and that one was laying in the bottom of that tube. All right, so we got everything tore apart, and we've been busy cleaning because, well, just can't stand dirt. So we've got this all sanded. I gotta wipe it down another 12 times because every time I wipe it down, the rag comes out almost as dirty as the last time. As I was talking about in the beginning of things when we started the differential, this is the seal dome, and it sits like so. We've got the seal out of this. We've shot this and got it all cleaned up and the gasket off of it, which incidentally was almost as hard as the metal it was made out of. But Benjamin scraped it off and then run this through the vapor blaster and got it cleaned up. It's been clear coated so it won't rust like it did originally. We'll be putting a new seal in this here in a little bit. I got the differential cleaned and the axle tubes cleaned enough so I can get the masking tape to stick to it. I'm going to then shoot that differential housing in fresh paint. We're going to take this side outside and paint it as soon as I get it cleaned. And at that point, we'll be ready to put a seal in that and maybe do a little bit of reassembly work. All right, we're going to wrap up this week's edition with a checking off of stuff that we've gotten done. So we have degreased the transmission. I'm going to order probably some new mounts. These transmission mounts are pretty knackered up. They've been soaking up oil for years and are pretty mushy. I could limp by on them, but we'll probably order some new ones. They are shown as being available, surprisingly. Throwout bearing, we got everything apart, and so we just need to order a new bearing and press it on that sleeve, and that's ready to go. The CV joint actually isn't even a CV joint. The universal that's in it, though, has been replaced at some point in its life, so I'm going to cross that off. We will grease it, and we're probably going to change out the grease fitting on it because they put one in the bearing cap sticking straight out, and it's been spinning around like a lawnmower blade, chewing things up inside the trunnion. So we'll do something better with that, probably put a plug in it or a different grease fitting. We have our fuel pump diaphragm, so one of our upcoming videos I'm going to go through. I've never rebuilt a fuel pump before, so going to be kind of interesting. See what I run into doing that. I'll leave it at that. All this stuff down here, strut rod sway bar bushings are made and ready to go. Shocks are all ready to go. Brakes are all ready to go. Lines are ready to go. The idler arm, the part is on order for that, and once it arrives, I've got to get busy and cut and press the old one apart, and then we're ready to press the new one in. I think that's due to show up in a week or two, and we don't need it for a little bit yet because none of that goes back in until the powertrain is all back in. Then we can put the steering linkage in. So, and all this being done by mid-May, we're getting a lot of stuff marked off. This right here, even though it's under the done by mid-May, gas tank, if we don't get this done, and we don't need it done till probably mid-early June, but we will actually bring a 1961 Rambler in here that we have, and we'll steal the fuel tank out of that since they're the same tank basically. So that's our plan B for this, is we're going to steal a tank from another car. We're going to do kind of the same thing when it comes to wheels and tires over here. So we've been doing a lot of extra cleaning and painting and all that sort of stuff just because we've got a backup plan. So anyway, I'm going to leave you with that. Say thank you for watching. We appreciate you watching and leaving us comments. And if you are not a subscriber, please consider subscribing. There's also a number of people have commented to me they don't get an email. There's a separate little link there. You put a checkbox in that sends you an email when a new video comes out. So if you want emails, be sure to check that box. Just subscribing won't get you an email.
Dad, it's the bell. You have to click on the bell icon.
Mayhem says click on the bell icon. All right. You can tell how often I do this. I fix cars. Technology I let him worry about. Anyway, thanks for watching.